First question regards transit investments. Have you leveraged your transit investments to spread growth? And can you share the steps that you've taken for investments to benefit communities and businesses that we're all trying to bring into our inclusive growth strategies? You want to start us?
Sure. Thank you for right-setting this conversation, because I was getting all ready to talk about zoning policies and, BRT construction. And it is so right to remember that this is about people. And I think it is exciting that this whole field has really evolved towards a more human-centered focus. In Oakland, I think there are a couple things that we've done, and I just want to recognize, I know Jeff Tomlin is out in the room, although that is if he got up from his dancing escapades last night. He helped lead our brand new Department of Transportation, which we just stood up. It took us 2 years to stand it up, one of my first actions as mayor. But led us through a strategic planning process. And the staff itself really led this process, and they purposely chose equity as the driver for our transportation plan. And I just want to commend these workers, because they were not told that this needed to be their focus. It came from their own values. And that's one of the things that makes me so proud to be the mayor of Oakland, where not just my residents hold those values, but the city workforce actually holds and lives those values. But what does that look like on the ground? We did since this is Rail Volution, we did a revolutionary thing in Oakland. We looked at where our best transit hubs were, and we eliminated parking requirements for new construction.
All right.
We even created parking maximums. And why that is an equity strategy is, I know all of our cities are struggling, but nobody like the Bay Area is struggling with an affordability crisis. And just to remind people of the human impact, I was excited. My little 4th grader went off to elementary school, and I ran into her principal and I said, I'm excited about Lena's year, but I'm sad she didn't get Mrs. Porter, who Dominic had in 4th grade. She was just one of the most amazing teachers that I think my son ever had. And she said, oh, she isn't with us anymore. She couldn't afford to stay in the Bay Area, and so she left. That is a huge human impact. And in the Bay Area, where we have added 8 new jobs for every 1 unit of housing that we have built for the last 15 years we've been doing this. We've been growing our economy faster than we've been growing our housing stock. This has resulted in super commuters. This has resulted in kids that get up when it is still dark and spend 2 hours going back to the school that they were at because their parents have had to move not to the suburbs, to the exurbs, outside of the Bay Area, just to be able to afford to live. And so this housing transportation connection, I think, is one of the most important things that we have to talk about when we talk about equity. The last thing I'll throw in there is we were very excited to be one of the first cities to get funding for a bus rapid transit. And we purposely chose the route that connects our low-income communities of color with our opportunity areas, the community colleges, the downtown, our BART system that gets people over to the bigger San Francisco job market. That was a very intentional route that we selected, and I hope to get a chance later to talk about what we're doing along that route to also address the potential displacement and gentrification threats that even a bus improvement can make in these neighborhoods.
We'll come back to that for sure.
Yeah, I'll go get into summer.
I think so.
All right.
Can you hear the mayor?
You guys can hear me? Yeah, I can hear it now. I won't get into the specifics, it would be like preaching to the clergy, but I think that there are a couple of things that are absolutely essential if you're going to build the capacity to do the things you want to see in your city. Number one, we didn't have a Department of Transportation either. And having it have the ideas and what's happening with discussion around mobility and opportunity and community building, you can't put that through the same department that patches potholes. And for so many cities, that is the model. So, and it really can't come through the planning department either, because there are a lot of construction type operations that need to go beyond the planning to the implementation. You need to have a Department of Transportation. In Pittsburgh, we have a Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. Karina Ricks, who's here, we brought in from DC to create it. And we're in year 2 starting next year. Just a short point, the reason that it's called DOMI is because I'm a huge hockey fan. And there used to be a guy that played for Toronto named Ty Domi. And when it came out that way, I said yes. And if you look at my logo, it's actually the 1980s St. Louis Blues blue. But DOMI now has the opportunity to work off of community-based plans. There's a group, PCRG, Chris Sandvig, who's here, who's been able to identify where we have transit deserts, where throughout the city there aren't opportunities to be able to get to point A to point B, and then coordinate that with city planning so that we have a comprehensive plan for each of our neighborhoods. Pittsburgh has 90 neighborhoods, all distinct, all unique, and within so many of them, we've seen years of planning that have just driven highways through the low-income areas. They become areas where there are flyovers and where there really hasn't been any investment because it gets you past it. So our goal is to figure out ways to have not only a stop there, but basing the future of the development of that community around centralized planning coming through DOMI and then being implemented by planning in our Urban Redevelopment Authority.
Transit deserts.
Yeah.
Remember that.
It's like food deserts, right?
Yep.
Maurice, I want to thank you as well for sharing that story. That was a powerful story because we can't lose the human element of what we do or what our why is all about. In 2004, our region, metro region, passed a 0.4% sales tax to build a $4.7 billion rail system, transit system in the metro region. I am of the mindset that there's no greater predictor of poverty than lack of mobility options. And what this transit system created for us, particularly in Denver, are 21 transit-oriented development communities or opportunities. Of course, that rail that hopefully you all took to get downtown today from our airport is part of that system. We inaugurated that just a little over a year ago, a year and a half ago. And it's a huge opportunity to leverage attraction of business, relocation of business, as well as to bring all populations, I think, in closer contact with our opportunities of quality of life, or as former Secretary of Transportation Anthony Fox would call the ladders of opportunity. To take those TOD sites to build housing, affordable housing, to build educational opportunities, to build job or access to jobs, healthcare, nutrition. We can begin to erase the food deserts, the transit deserts, lifting people out of poverty, giving them access to workforce training. Those are the opportunities we're trying to leverage here. I'll never forget while touring one of our TOD sites where public housing had been built. And our Denver Housing Authority has really broken the mold in terms of what public housing looks like. They have gone way above and beyond what housing we grew up in terms of public housing. And it is efficient. You wouldn't know it was public housing unless someone told you it was public housing. And as I was touring it, this young man walked out of his unit and he had his backpack on, and I took the time to talk to him, and I said, well, what are you doing? He says, I'm headed to school. He's a college student. And literally 50 feet from the back door of his apartment complex was a transit stop. And if you talk about erasing barriers, there was no greater eraser than the access to that transit system, which took him literally a mile up north to where he would walk into a classroom. And it's that kind of opportunity, to power that opportunity, that kind of, I think, levels the playing field. The last thing I'll share with you to talk about the power to attract business and business opportunities. When I was elected mayor in 2011, the first business attraction opportunity we had was the Department of Commerce that was shopping these patent and trademark offices around the country. And Detroit had already been awarded one. There were 3 others to be awarded. Denver was deep into the competition, and we won one. Big deal for us. 400 jobs, $40 million economic impact to bring these patent and trademark off. We become kind of the center place of the West for patent and trademark and innovation. I remember sitting with the representatives from the Department of Commerce, the selection committee members, when they came in to announce. And I asked them, why did you select Denver? And the guy looked at me and said, Mayor, actually Denver was a very natural selection. When we surveyed our inspectors and asked them all over the country, what cities should we look at? They said, we want you to select cities that have invested in transit so that we're not sitting in gridlock. We want cities that are thinking about how we can put housing, accessible affordable housing, decent affordable housing at those TODs so that we can choose to live our lives, live, work, and play pretty much in the same areas. But we want to not worry about being on roads, highways, and we want to be able to move about efficiently. And he looked at me and said, this region's investment in that transit system made all the difference. And so you get a chance to kind of see how we attract business, how we level the playing field, how we can lift people out of challenging economic conditions and create opportunities through investment in transit.
Good stuff, good stuff.